Hello everyone, and thanks for tuning in. In this week's episode, we have two Season 2 entrants to Showtime's Emmy-nominated drama series Yellowjackets, Emmy-winning director Liz Garbus and cinematographer Shasta Spahn.
Hi everyone, and welcome to The Process. I'm Liz Garbus, one of the directors on this season's Yellowjackets, and I'm so pleased to be here in conversation with our incredible cinematographer, Shasta Spahn. We will be talking today about Yellowjackets, Shasta, craft, all those great things. Hi, Shasta.
Hi, Liz. So nice to see you.
We have our own talk show.
I know. This is great. This is perfect timing.
So Shasta, tell me a little bit about how you decided that this was something you wanted to pursue. Like, when did you first know that cinematography was a calling for you? Tell us a little bit about how you found your way into this world that you've mastered so beautifully.
Oh, well, thank you. I was a bit of a lost visual artist when I was younger. I, did photography in high school. I wanted to paint. I wanted to do all of these things, but I didn't really know what to do with them. So I had to go to college, and the only thing I was interested in was technical theater and lighting design, because I didn't have to do much but, focus lights and be on stage. And a friend of mine asked me to PA on a commercial with her. She was the AD, and I showed up on time. The producer started yelling at me for being late, and I looked around and I was like, these are my people. I love this place. And I drove.
You love that you were being yelled at, but like that you had the camaraderie of everybody else being like, "What? We got your back," or like, what was it that?
No, that it's just like, it's the film world. Like, being on time is being late. You get there, most directors get there an hour before they're supposed to be, or half an hour,
Half an hour.
But I just loved that world and that mentality, and it just fit my personality. And I dropped out of college and I started working on sets immediately. And once I was on a set and really could see what people were doing, I knew I wanted to shoot. I knew I wanted to be the DP. Like, everything that person was doing was interesting to me. And I had a producer sit me down basically and say, I will help you go in any direction you want to go. And he's like, I really think you should do production. He's like, I think you'd be a great, production manager or producer. And I was like, I am never going to sit in an office all day. I'm like, you have me so wrong. And so, yeah, I never looked back. I went towards being a director of photography.
Well, that's so interesting that the producer said that to you, because I can see there's part of you, you're so organized in your thinking. And as a director working with you, the way you think through your shot list and the way that you organize it with the floor plans and all that, like, I can kind of understand why they thought, oh, there's a little bit of a producer in there, but I'm so happy that you didn't listen to them. But I can understand, because you're so methodical about the way you prepare and plan. And as a director, I just found that so incredibly helpful and amazing. Who were the DPs? Like, who were your mentors? Did you have any DPs or directors or ACs or operators who were really people who inspired you, who you learned so much from?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of grew up in the commercial world. So I didn't get into narrative until about 6 years ago. So I was, in advertising in the commercial world, which is so different than TV or features. And so my mentors were probably a bit unknown to most people, but I remember the first woman director I ever worked with was Peggy Sirota, who is an incredible fashion and portrait photographer. And she was a great commercial director. And we were shooting on the Big Island in Hawaii, and on this like black lava, rock mountain. And she just looks at all of us and she's just like, I love you guys. This is the best thing in the world. And she just was she was just so lovely and so positive, and, talked to everyone the same way, and so willing to share information. I think she really influenced me in the beginning. I also worked with this incredible person named Joe Pitka, who was this insane filmmaker. He was a DP and a director, super visual, and I learned a lot about framing from him. But, in terms of cinematographers, I think Christopher Doyle is like one of my favorites. I love Matty Libatique. I think he's incredible. His work's so good. So yeah, there's so many, along the way and you change too, depending on what stage you are in your life.
And have you felt like over the course of working, in narrative, as you said, for the past 6 years, and even before that, that the numbers of women on your crews have been increasing? Like, how have you seen it? How have you seen that changing within the camera department, or have you not?
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't want to really date myself, but I started a very long time ago, and Peggy was one of the few women directors out in the commercial world. I did not work with a female DP for like a decade once I started. And majority of the crew were men, even in Los Angeles, which is a pretty more diverse, group of people here. I've traveled the world quite a bit, and I've been to many countries that don't have any women involved in any of the departments. But we always had at least one or two women somewhere around in certain departments. Camera was very scarce, and I was definitely one of the few females or only female for a very long time. But it has really grown, and especially has grown, I would say, in the last decade. It's been really interesting to see. And, I think 15 years ago, there was we need a woman DP. Who is that? And there's 5, and now there's so many. And I hope that conversation isn't, we need a woman DP, we need a really great DP. And who is that? And who's the best for the job? And it might be a man, it might be a woman, So I just think there's so much more happening now with women than there was when I first started. It's really great to see.
In the umbilical cord, which attaches to the placenta.
Guys, come on, you gotta learn this.
In this fetus, androgens have initiated the development of a phallus and scrotum.
Oh man, is that his dick? That's a piece of girl, right, Jeff? Dude, look at it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure those are his balls, dumbass.
Whatever.
As labor approaches,
Anybody want this? It's way too small for me. Magnums all day, baby.
Well, gosh, Randy, I mean, if these are really too small for you, then you should probably see a doctor about that thing.
Guys.
The cervix begins to dilate.
Okay, this is important.
Active labor is signaled by the rupture of the amniotic sac and the onset of powerful uterine contractions. These contractions will push the fetus through the birth canal and grow stronger as labor progresses.
Shauna, I can't stop thinking about how you nailed that tutoring session earlier. You should teach me again sometime.
My Jeff has no
The infant's lungs will fill with air, signaled by a cry.
Poppies, Jeff. Jackie likes poppies.
However, labor continues until the placenta and amniotic materials are expelled.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, Misty.
So, how much blood is there on average?
Let's go. Okay. Misty, what do we do?
Oh my God, please, someone just get it out of me!
And how do you choose your projects? I mean, even in just our time together, I know there were projects you were really excited about and some that you were meh. What for you is the right project? How do you know?
I think it's the script. And I also think it's that first meeting with the showrunners or the producers, or whoever it might be, if there's a producing director who's going to be involved, and just who those people are and how they work. And if we have a chemistry, which I think, knock on wood, I've been very fortunate to work with incredible people. And this, the projects have been great. The scripts have been great. And it's been incredible. But I think when we were working, I got called I had to do a meeting while we were prepping. And, every now and then you read something and it just doesn't click. Or for me, if I can't see it visually, if I can't see, the first script or 2 scripts that I'm reading, if I can't get a good sense of what I want the tone to be, what I want the camera to look like, what I think the language of the show might be, because I always try to come up with ideas and then collaborate and work with the showrunners and like, you know, build from there. And if I can't see it, I just, you know, I know it's not the project for me.
Are there genres that you say like, yeah, this is my sweet spot, or like, nah, that's not my thing? Or is it really just about the script itself in any genre?
Yeah, I think it's about the script itself. I think it's about the creators. I'm sort of open to all genres. I think I have been sort of put into sort of this horror category. So I get called for a lot of horror right now, which I love because it's so fun visually. But you know, someday I need to do a kids thing because my daughter won't watch anything I shoot. And she's like, I don't really care about what you do. But if you know, if you shot that movie, like if you shot like The Last Puss in Boots, that'd be great.
Okay. No, take note of that.
Yeah.
So thinking about like, tell us, like, were you a fan of Yellowjackets in the first season? And like, how was your first meeting with Ashley and Bart and Jonathan? What as we call them, Jab. Jonathan,
yes.
Ashley, and Bart.
Yes.
What was your first meeting with Jab like? And were you a fan of the show coming into it?
I was such a huge fan of the show. And I think I told them right off the bat, like, if I get this job or not, like, I cannot wait to see season 2 because I'm so excited for it. And I also felt it was like the first show, you know, if I was going to work on it, that I can't wait to watch, which, you know, sometimes when you're on a show and you're in so much of the process, you don't maybe watch it at the end because you've kind of already been there. But yeah, no, I was such a huge fan, and meeting them was great. I mean, they're really incredible people. And they're all 3 of them so very different. But it was a great first meeting, and I'm really brutally honest. I sort of go in with my thoughts, and they had already had a first season. So I wasn't sort of pitching a new idea to them. I kind of wanted to see if they were interested in elevating the next season and changing the things that I saw in the first season that for me visually didn't work. And so it's a little bit of a risk because you could offend them too. But
right, and they have a super successful show, right? Like they're, you know, that it is a risk, right? So, what were the things that you because their show is like a huge hit, and you're like, but anyway, here's what we're going to do in season 2.
Yeah. Let's change your Emmy-nominated show. I mean, and these were visual things for me that I think were inconsistent in the first season. And I think the first season was amazing. But fortunately, my first conversation and those thoughts that I brought up to them, they were on board. And I think you probably know Bart is super visual. I haven't actually seen a showrunner as visual as he is. And so he was very specific about, you know, what he liked in the first season, what he didn't like. And I think that's like the greatest thing about doing a second season. And it was my first time doing a second season, but that you can look at the first season, see what works, and really improve on it. I already have notes for season 3.
Yay.
Yeah.
So what were the things coming into season 2 that were really important to you? Like, what was your pitch to Jab that you wanted to do?
I wanted to ground the past story. And we were transitioning into winter, right? So the cabin was going to be a lot darker. We were building our winter forest on stage, which was a really huge project, an undertaking. And I wanted it to feel real. Like I wanted to feel if you're in the middle of a forest, you know, in outside of New York, at night, what does that look like? You know, I know we have to see our characters, but what does that look like? And, you know, is there blue streaming moonlight coming through the trees? Usually not, you know. So I wanted to really ground it. I wanted to have stricter rules and language, or stricter rules for the language of the camera. And I wanted to change it this season because for that storyline, they weren't just trying to survive. They knew they were going to be there for an unlimited amount of time, right? So it wasn't as frenetic as like, you know, survival. It was like, here we are, now what? So it needed to have a different feel for this season and what was going to happen with their story. I mean, especially our episode. I mean, when I read that and talk about like, not fears, but trying to figure out how to shoot, you know, I don't remember how many scenes, like 25 scenes in 3 rooms of a dark cabin. Like that was a really intense moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was kind of brings me to my next question. And so much of it as a director, I so appreciate your collaboration on the blocking. I mean, because you're in this confined space with so many characters. And in our episode that we worked on together, they never got outside, right? And so I was grounded in that, in the space of the cabin. But overall, I'm not going to assume those are your big. What is the biggest challenge for you on the show, and also what's the most delicious opportunity? What are the kind of the highs and the
interesting? I think the opportunity for me this season was to create this new sort of rule book and language. I think in the present day story, I really wanted to play with framing and camera moves, and I wanted it to be beautiful. Like it's present day story with all these incredible characters, and like, why can't it also be gorgeous at the same time? And so that was really important for me to sort of change the look of the present day storyline and really play. I mean, that was a little bit harder because there were so many existing sets from the first season. And so to really play with camera moves and camera angles that we didn't really see in the first season and kind of build on that. I think the biggest challenges, and we saw it a lot in 206, was being in a small space with so many actors. And so many actors that had like one or two lines in one scene, and how do you cover that? And how is it interesting? And how does the camera move? And how does it work? And how does it help the story? I think that was the biggest challenge. I think I feared the cabin quite a bit just because of the size of it, the darkness of it, still making it feel grounded. It's only lit by if there's any light outside, or at night, it's the only firelight. So we can't really make any artificial light that's that would stand out. I didn't want that feeling. So that was the challenge. But after we mastered it in 206, I was like, I can shoot anything in that cabin now. Like, bring it. Bring a whole episode in there. Just one room.
And yeah, I want to say for people who watch the show, I mean, like, the enormous challenge that you manage so seamlessly is like, yeah, you're inside a dark cabin with only a few places of credible natural light. Yet, Shasta, you found incredibly beautiful ways to light these characters, to let us understand the world that they were in while being very true to the reality of the wilderness. And that's just like a really special challenge and accomplishment that you make seem invisible, but we all know is a great challenge and opportunity. Yeah.
I knew you could do it. It's a boy, Shauna.
Silent kid is looking down the bad road.
How difficult is it to orchestrate coverage for such a large ensemble and with so many people who have journeys we're tracking over the season? I mean, each one of them, in the younger cast, for example, is on a very specific path leading us to the finale of allegiances and shifting emotional states, shifting physical states. How difficult is it to orchestrate that coverage?
Difficult, and it just requires a lot of prep and a lot of thinking. And it was interesting because the present timeline started where everyone was so separate, so you would only be shooting 2 or 3 people in a scene at a time. And it was almost like a relief. You'd go from the cabin and all of these YJs, these young, I think sometimes it was 11 to 13 people in one cabin room. And then you go to the adult storyline and you're like, oh, it's only 3 people. It's only 2 people. But as the season has, progressed, they all come together. And then it's like, oh my goodness, I'm in a cabin with 12 YJs, and now I'm in, Lottie's compound with, 8 people. And it's hard. It's hard to do it, make it interesting and make it flow. And it just takes so much time looking at the scene, blocking it, working with you, working with the director at the time, and really putting a plan together, and trying to make it as fluid and, seamless as possible and not feel like we're doing this,
This question is so like directory, and it's like, how is it for you when you've you're on a show, everybody, and then you have guest directors popping in and out, who come in, some with like tons of ideas, some that don't always necessarily gel with the look that you've set for the season. Maybe it's more in line with what was happening next season. In the prior season. Yeah. And people who come in with different points of view. How do you, as a cinematographer, kind of hold your ground, protect your space of the beauty you want to make, but then also adapt? Like, you get a new boss every couple months.
Yeah.
So what's that like?
It is great and exciting and incredibly challenging. I will say that Yellowjackets is the first show I've ever been on and shot that every director that I worked with was incredible. And all of you were very different, but everyone was so open to hear sort of, my ideas or where we were going this season. And then everyone built it in their own way differently, but I think it still was cohesive. And the talent on this season was insane. And I've never been on a show like that. Like, the show I did before Yellowjackets, I did for 2 years. It was an anthology, and every director was different, every episode. And it was, sometimes the directors really knew their craft and what they were doing. And then others maybe just were only about actors, but really didn't have sort of a visual language idea or even thought. So you just, as a DP, you always have to come in and you have to bend and adjust, and to be able to either, like Scott Wynett in 204, he's been doing it for, I don't want to age him, but he's been doing it for a very long time. My so-called life, very long time. And he knew blocking so well. Like, he just knew every scene of that episode, like what he wanted to do and where the camera was. And so for him, he wanted to do a lot of 360. So he would tell me his ideas, and then I would just spend the time trying to figure out how to light it or how to get the camera to do these moves he wanted to do. And then, so it's just, you just adapt, and you have to be able to do this, and you have to be able to do this, and you have to protect the director as well as the show. So it's a balance always. So I read that you made your first documentary in high school, which is quite young. I wanted to find out, when did you think about becoming a filmmaker, and was it always documentaries?
Yeah, that's so funny. Yes. And I didn't even call it a documentary. We were so much less media literate at that time when I was in high school, because we didn't have iPhones and we didn't have all of this at our fingertips. So it was like that my parents had bought a camcorder, like a VHS camcorder, and I took it to school and I started filming our last week of senior year in high school. And I was then did this in-camera edit where I showed it to a bunch of families and parents. And there was somebody's father was a documentary filmmaker, and he was like, "Oh, Lizzie, you've made a documentary." And I was like, I have, and it was so that was the beginning. But when I went to college, I actually, when I took film classes, I actually was mostly working in narrative in that space. So I had this idea about documentary back in my head from this experience in high school. But then when I was playing around formally, I was interested in scripted. And then when I got out of college and I started working for other filmmakers, I ended up working for a documentary filmmaker, and along with him making my first documentary. And that documentary became there was first an hour-long film, and then it became this feature, The Farm, Angola, USA, which got into Sundance, and it launched my career as a documentary director. And then there were just wonderful films I wanted to make, but I never lost that early, not early, but I never lost the yen to to work with actors and to kind of have the the visual toolkit that scripted affords you. And that documentary, of course, there are possibilities for, incredible impressionistic visuals, but it's a tighter budget, it's a smaller team. And I also, like you, I love crew life. Like, I love the camaraderie. I love being on a team. Like, I love it. And again, I love working with actors and creatives like yourself. So for me, it was just something that I always wanted to get back to. And then in the past 10 years, I do think, our industry has just become that much more open to female directors. And it's been just the access that I've been able to have on the scripted side has grown. So now I feel like I have this pretty beautiful balance in my life of being able to move between both mediums, and they really inform each other. And I feel like, I can bring a lot of the real world experience I have to the actors. And then I can bring the kind of heightened visual, creativity, pushing the envelope from scripted into docs. And, I feel like that it'll just never get boring for me that way, right? Like, it's just constantly like re-enlivening itself. Not that it would get boring if I was just in one. I'm not saying that at all. We're so privileged to have this job, but I just think that there's this constant learning process, which I can be engaged in, which is what makes me feel alive and excited about projects.
I was just going to ask you, now that you do both, you do scripted and non-scripted, is there a difference in the process of prep for you? And what is that, if there is?
Yeah, it's a huge difference. I mean, I thought our Yellowjackets prep period was really wonderful. I mean, you and I had enough time to like shot list on set, to go to our various locations, to work together on floor plans. Like, we had that time. I had time to rehearse with the cast. That was incredible. So we could really work out all the blocking. Like, as you mentioned earlier, episode 6 had, it was an intense episode with a lot of Yellowjackets in a confined space, going through big, big things. And so that was wonderful prep. Documentary prep is very different. I mean, it's about finding characters. I mean, it's about kind of deep research. It's about turning over rocks and trying to find what story you wouldn't have thought of. It's about thinking about how do you intertwine, like the singular story, the individual story with the larger one. Who are those voices? And then, how do you elevate it visually to keep kind of pushing the form? So yeah, they're really different. I mean, I find it to be quite analogous in the edit room, the two processes, but prep is very different. Can you tell us, like, what do you most enjoy? Like, what gets you high on set? What is like the thing where you're like, oh, I just love this job?
Oh my God. Everything.
Okay, well, I'll make it more specific if that's too broad. When we were like on episode 6, like what was something that really made you excited and happy that you just felt like we nailed this? Like, was there any particular experience?
There was, because I hadn't had this experience before. And then just to preface by saying, I love that what I do, that every time I do what I do, it's different. Every day, every project is so different, and so many different challenges and things come up that you're always pivoting and problem solving. And I think that's the most delicious part about this, what we do. But on 206, I think it was, I know it was the birthing scene with Sophie Nélisse. And, I'm always staring at those monitors and I'm looking for every mistake, just try to make sure everything's perfect. And her performance, every time she did it, I got so captured by it. I completely stopped looking at the monitor and I was just watching the performance. And I think I cried every take that she did. And I had never had that experience before. And I was just like, I just loved it. I mean, I need to pay attention, of course, but like, it was so powerful and so strong. And I think, the entire crew behind the camera felt that, and the energy was so intense. And it was that was a really beautiful moment. And that was insane. I don't know. Do you remember that? Like, we were all just like.
Yes. And I actually remember that after we shot and we did the final take of the last scene in that sequence where she, realizes that the baby didn't make it. And, she's screaming about, can't you hear him crying like he's in? And you feel that grief and rage that not just like us behind the camera were crying. After I called cut, like the other Yellowjackets started crying. All the actors started crying. Like, it was so powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think we all felt this enormous grief, and then we're like, okay, wait, it's okay. Like, we're here. Like, it's not. But it was really something powerful, really powerful.
Yeah.
Shasta, you're amazing. You're a joy to work with. You're a joy to talk to, and so thank you for chatting with me about Yellowjackets and our really special collaboration on episode 206. And thanks for listening to The Process.